All right, this is Vice Chairman Kevin Catula calling the special town council meeting to order on April 19th, 2022 at 7:02 p.m. For roll call purposes, Mr. Grandowski is absent with notification, Mr. Wood is absent with notification, and Mr. Anderson is on his way here. He should be here shortly. Public comment. Is there anybody here for public comment, or we have any submitted?
Mary Clorio, Town Manager. We did not receive any written public comment for tonight's meeting.
Thank you. Is there anyone in the audience for public comment?
Nobody's in the audience.
All right. Seeing none, then we'll go into the item 3 is budget deliberation. Consideration and action on a resolution setting the town of Kinley operating budget for fiscal year 2022 and 2023. I believe Mr. Anderson had given you some scenarios that we've gone over, and I think some of that's in front of us.
Yeah, so I just want to go over some of the chairman had relayed to me some potential scenarios that the council may want to consider. So I know you're going to be going through your deliberations, but the first thing that he had requested was a 10-year look back of the Board of Education surplus and what was returned to fund balance and also what was transferred into non-lapsing. So we did do that. You'll note that the very first 3 years from fiscal year 12 to fiscal year 14, we also noted that there were supplemental appropriations that was regarding special education. That was under a previous agreement that the town and the Board of Education had around their budgeting process. And the agreement allowed the Board of Education to come to the town for a supplemental appropriation mid-year if they were overexpending on just their special education expenditures. That practice ended in 2000 for the 2015 year, largely because the town at that point in time had been hit on our credit rating by doing the mid-year supplementals, and so they changed their process. It was also timed with about the time that transitioned from minimum expenditure requirement at the state level to a minimum budget requirement, and those supplemental appropriations impacted minimum had that potential impact of the minimum budget requirement. So that piece was modified, that agreement was modified, which is why you don't see them moving forward. From there forward, from 15 through current, it reflects what their year-end surplus was, and this ties to the audit. And what was transferred in each year to the non-lapsing to show the net impact to fund balance for those remaining years. I don't know if anybody has any questions on that schedule.
I hear footsteps.
Yep,
So-
I hear Mr. Anderson joining us. So just to brief you, we were going over the very first page, which is just the last 10 years of budget surpluses from the Board of Education side, as you had previously requested, and what was transferred to non-lapsing to give the net impact to fund balance. The next page that I provided to you was another scenario that reflected an increase, reflected a potential reduction in the Board of Education, but it reflects an increase use of fund balance up to the current year's threshold. The current year we're utilizing $1,550,000 from fund balance. This one would increase the pavement management by $350,000, which would give a total pavement management budget of $2 million instead of the $1.6 million. And it would utilize $1,545,000 of fund balance, and it would result in a flat mill rate. We also reflected what the projected fund balance would be for the fiscal year at 19.23%. Your next page goes along with this scenario in that it does a projection out for the next 5 years, because again, when we look at the utilization of fund balance, we always want to look to see what the sustainability is of that and how we may potentially begin to step down over a period of time from utilizing or reliance on the fund balance to into the operating budget. So what I have as a scenario before you, and again, this is all scenarios, this can all be changed, but the base year for 2022, it's reflecting a very conservative estimate for increase to fund balance. It's identifying the amount that has been previously communicated, however, it has not been formalized, a use of 2.5 million of fund balance towards the community center project. So that has been communicated in the past, that has not been formally acted upon in any way, but I wanted to give you that as a scenario so you knew in a placeholder where that would be and what the fund balance impact would be. And then we rolled it out for, what would it look like, this scenario for 2023, and then subsequently, if we did the same level of investment in roads, so keeping the level of investment for roads at 2 million, but slowly, incrementally bringing down the use of fund balance to help in that offset, to show what the impact of fund balance would be. So really you have, around the fiscal year of 2025 is really where you start to kind of make that break point of being close to the 15%. You would have sufficient time prior to that to make determinations around modifications to a program or modifications of the use of fund balance. So you could, you wouldn't have to be reactionary to that scenario. There would be sufficient space within that. So I'm gonna stop there, and I'm gonna actually kind of turn it over to Matt. Matt had prepared for you what, and that's the slide that we're gonna put up on the screen, and that's what you see here. So currently, in the current fiscal year, we have budgeted 800,000. We're doing a little bit more than the 800,000 as far as road work this year because of, as we've mentioned, we have some saved up town aid road funds that we're expending in the current year for some road reconstruction. And also, we've been able to leverage some utility pavement in order to be able to make it go a little bit farther, right? So we've been able to leverage about 1.4 million in the current year. So while he articulated in his last spreadsheets to you that we were at a rating of 63, after we complete this construction cycle of 2022, so December of 22 is really what you're when you look at the bottom number, think December 22, we'll be up to just above the 65. So I'm gonna turn it over to Matt so he can kind of walk through with you what the different funding level mechanisms mean and what the impact is on that, road infrastructure asset that the town has.
All right, thanks for having me again, guys. If I keep this up, I'll want my own spinoff pretty soon. Okay, so yeah, just jumping right into it. When Jen comes back, I might have her scroll down on there. But on what you guys can see, the red line for 800 is where we're currently at this year. So that's just why it's on there. The 1.6 is on here because that's what our ask was. The reason why I put that as an ask and not higher originally was because I was under the impression it was going all to mill rate, and I just want everybody to know that I was cognizant of what that could do to the mill rate. That's why I was going for just the maintenance, and that's what it costs to be maintenance. But with looking at some of these other potentials for supplementing it, I wanted to show you what the potential could be down the road. So this is just a projection. I spent a lot of time on working on the models on this to make sure they came out right, and they seem to be pretty close to what will happen based on past data and industry standard data. So if we do, I mean, if anybody has any really questions, I know the graph pretty much definitely shows it very well. The one spot, where do I want to go on this? The 2.5 million, if you just, we'll go right off the bat at that one. Over the course of the next 5 years, you get to 2027, you'd be at a PCI of the whole network of a 77, which is amazing. That would be right around where we'd want to go. That's a short amount of time too.
Just to clarify, that's a $2.5 million investment annually per year.
Yep.
And so that's why I didn't go over the second set of scenarios that we gave you because that hadn't been an ask of the 2.5 million. And this was really something that Matt, I'd asked Matt to pull together to see what, if there's a scenario, we did run the fund balance analysis on this as well, to see if it's something that the council can or should consider. So we have that scenario for you. But each of these scenarios is based on the same funding annually. So you can see where a $2.5 million investment gets you substantially improved roads over a quicker period of time, less so with the $2 million. And then with the 1.6 million, you can see that we do go up a little bit, but we're almost kind of status quo, right? I mean, it's more of a maintenance budget. And as you can see, at the current level of 800,000, we lose ground. We just keep losing ground. We're just going to keep going down. So, Matt, if you can go over the percentages and
Yeah.
what this means to the overall
So
infrastructure.
a lot of it's very similar to like a compound interest is pretty much what you get. It's almost exactly the same as the concept of compound interest. At the very bottom in the table, you can see where we're at the end of 2017 or 2027, where we would be at for different categories. The ideal target in the top two bands, routine and preventative, you'd be looking at hopefully anywhere between 60 and 80% is where you want your town to live. And then you want 60 to 80% in the top bracket, and then
20 to
40 to 20 to 40 in the bottom bracket. So as you go across, you can see the amount of miles and percent of miles in the network in each category. The 1.6, you're not bad. You got a lot of the middle roads out, but you've increased the amount of roads that are in reconstruction quite a bit over where we're at currently. So now your town's very separated. There's a lot of very good roads and a lot of very bad roads. The 2 million is a similar breakdown, really. It's the same percentages. There's a little bit more in the middle that are left in the middle, but it's the same type of thing. At the 2.5, you are still at the two ends of the spectrum, but you have a lot less that are in reconstruction, which means from this chart shows it at 2027, but at 2026, even 2025, you could start to turn the dial back on what you need, because now you have a lot more that are at preservation, so it's cheaper per mile to maintain them. Nicer roads are cheaper to maintain than bad roads. So it's kind of one of those where you're better off to make heavier investments now and then dial back than tune up slow. I know it's hard to jump in all at once, but that's kind of how it would work.
And so when we get to 2025, there's the potential of kind of splitting the green line and the blue line to a different funding level, right? And start coming off of the 2.5. So the fund balance projection that we gave you, which is the last 2 pages that we gave you, is how much would we have to use out of fund balance to make this $2.5 million investment next year and keep a level mill rate with the same scenario that you had provided to me. And that investment is $2,045,000. That's the investment out of fund balance. That brings projected fund balance down to, 18.75% roughly. So if we look at kind of the run out of that, you really have the ability to make that on the last page. You really have the ability to make that potential investment, assuming the same $2.5 million investment for the community center over the course of 2, potentially 3 years before you really want to start looking at dialing that back. Now, I will say in both scenarios that I provided you for fund balance usage, you'll note that it's not the exact same amount each year. I've started the dial back process. So in the first scenario at $2 million, I'm putting $100,000 off of fund balance and into mill rate each year. At the 2.5 million, I've dialed it at 200,000 each year. So each year the request from fund balance drops by 200,000, and that the investment doesn't change in the roads. That 200,000 would go to mill rate, right? So that's the dial back and the progressive phase in. But again, as Matt said, we wouldn't be looking to phase in all 2.5 million, right? This would start to phase in that process to get to your maintenance of the 1.6, 1.8. And then you may only be looking at having a smaller amount out of fund balance to continue to make that that gap piece, whether it's to get you to 1.9 or 2.1 in order to be able to get up to your where the roads are more at that prevention, routine maintenance schedule at that 75 percentile area for for that long term. And then you really just dial back mostly to that preservation. You still have
Yeah.
a chunk that's in reconstruction that will have, we have to get through those as well. But,
And those will never go away. There will be some that will always get to that point, and sometimes that's by design, depending on the road or where they are. There's some that you will let go. It's kind of like punting in sports. There's sometimes you strategically let it go because it makes more sense for everything else. So there will always be some that live in that. And then the way these models ran with all the zeros, you're never going to, I don't think, comfortably get to zeros in categories. You will get real close, but there's never going to be, because you'll know that you have room before it goes down to the next bracket. So sometimes you'll let it go out of routine to maybe do a little bit more in reconstruction a year. So you'll let it go from routine to preventative because you're still in that top bracket. So like that will happen over time. And I didn't run a split model on the graph. I ran one or two, I think it was two different ones on just to see what they did with splitting the funding down the road. And what I found is if you go from a higher funding to a lower funding, say at 2025, you go from 2.5 to 2 or 1.6, that trend line of the new funding still continues. So if you cut from 2.5 at 2025 to 1.6, that trend line of going up 2 PCI in the next 2 years should still hold. But the opposite is true if you go from a lower funding to a higher funding. You necessarily don't at 800,000 at 2025. If you tried to go to 2.5, then you're not going to get that 2 PCI jump. It doesn't really. It's a little harder to have it really work out to have it say like a direct correlation, but from higher to lower seems to be a pretty direct correlation. And there is one other thing that I thought was very interesting. It's the very last line in the table. At the end of 2027, if you were to run these all the way through, it would cost at 1.6 million, we would gain 4 PCI, and it would cost us 2.6 million for those 4, for each PCI of those 4. And then as you go up 2 million, you'll increase 6, but it would only cost us 1.6 million per PCI. And then 2.5 would be 1.1 million per PCI for 11 PCI, because you're able to start getting more roads up quicker before they get to the most expensive part. So that's the best way to really try to compare it, apples to apples, I feel, is what you're getting for your money. And I know that is usually a pretty big concept is, people want to know, all right, well, what am I exactly getting for this?
so we kind of gave you an additional scenario, just because, recognizing that roads is your largest public asset. And after the feedback that we got from the presentation that Matt had given you, trying to give you a scenario of what it would look like to make that that investment in that level of improvement to the roads. Is that something that is possible and doable in this consideration? So that's what we've provided you for additional information in your budgetary deliberations.
And I had a few things, if you guys don't mind, just to add on to that, because going from my last presentation and talking to some people with the feedback from that, plus the newspaper article and some feedback I've gotten directly, is I know that I did a lot of graphs and charts, and there was a lot of technical discussion, and I know sometimes that doesn't always ring the same for everybody. But like a couple notes that I made in my talking to other people is that I understand that these are large numbers. Like, I get it. Like, I get a lot of people be like, this is a really, really large number, and I can see where people would want to wait and take small steps and not so much at once. But like right now, as a community, as a nation, we're at a forefront of pavement preservation, and it's going to go on in the area whether we join in or not. Other towns are going to start to hop on this. Other towns are going to see the benefit in this, and if they do, it's just going to leave us further behind. To me, the dedication to this will encourage the town's development and growth, which I feel is all of our obligations to all the stakeholders in Killingly. I know a lot of people might ask why the roads, like, why is that your goal of everything? And I feel like the goal of the roads is that effort, and that goal is the foundation on which will help Killingly grow. I feel the dedication here is one area where staff and elected officials can make the most difference with their decision. It's the most direct thing that could happen from any decision that yourselves or I would make. There's a noticeable, tangible, quick result in this. And I'm not just saying this because I want to pave roads and overseeing that is my job. I want this because I honestly believe that it will make Killingly nicer. It will start to make it more attractive for everything else that's harder for us to actually have control of. It'll make it more attractive to businesses. It'll make it more attractive for other people moving in the area. And I've heard for years, I'm on my 11th year working for Killingly now, and I've heard for years people say, why doesn't Killingly do this like this town, or they do this like this other town? And I feel we're at the opportunity to be a leader where people would say that about us. It would say, be like Killingly. They have really nice roads, the nicest roads in the area. Because we are right now at the chance we could be ahead. I mean, there's been a lot of publicity to this, so I'm sure other towns are listening. But we have a chance to definitely be the leader. And I know you guys have talked about a vision, looking at what the vision of Killingly is. And my input to that would be this. This would be my input to what the vision should be. I know a lot of people talk about preserving the town's history and heritage, and I mean, the town was grown on the Industrial Revolution with that innovation and initiative that came with the industry and the commerce of the textile mills. I feel to honor that, we shouldn't stumble through this next era, and I feel that road preservation is a big part of that. I understand this costs a good chunk of money for everybody, and that's why I feel like this should have a high priority. And I feel that, I know some people may say, it's just the act of hope, like you don't know that this is going to make that big of a difference, but there has been a lot of studies with this and areas where it has shown when it's properly funded, the benefits are more than you could ever expect, and you just have to trust the process. It's a little bit of work. It's a few years. It's 5 years on this, and there will be a noticeable difference. Like I said, good roads are cheaper to maintain than bad ones, and once we're at a healthy level, you can dial back, and that is when there is a true benefit for everybody, because you'll have better roads that cost less money. But until then, we have some work to do to get there. And that's all I had to say. So that's, I guess, my public comment as an employee, but thank you.
Thank you. One analogy I think of being in the automotive industry is when someone doesn't do the maintenance on their vehicle, and you have what could have been a low-cost repair becomes a catastrophic failure, and you're spending 10, 20 times what it would cost if you had just done the preventive maintenance all along. So that's kind of what I think of when I look at this. I will admit, when I was my first year on the council, my first budget, our previous town manager, when the council was looking for places to cut money, first thing he said was the bituminous line, which is your asphalt. And being new to the council, I went along with the guidance of the town manager at that point, as well as the rest of the council did. And seeing how the roads have continued to decrease over the past several years, I realized that something, in hindsight, going back, I would not have been in favor of cutting it, learning what I've learned over the years. And it's too bad that the town went in that direction, and looking back at, up until the past couple of years, what the town has been spending on road maintenance is minuscule, and you see it in the quality of our roads.
And I think a lot of that was it wasn't, a lot of people didn't know. I don't think it was there wasn't as much done at the time. So it's hard to say it's any council's fault or anybody's fault. I do remember that when it happened, and I'm like, it doesn't seem like the right direction to go. But again, I hadn't spent as much time with this, and that's where hasn't really come to our area yet, but it will be here, and that's why. So sorry to interrupt you, but I do agree with everything you said, and I don't think we can blame ourselves for what was decided before, and even then we would have gotten it, and I don't know if there was a real reason why that was before I was in my position. I remember the number being asked, but I don't know if there was a real reason why the number was the number, and that's what I tried to compile all this stuff for, to show why the number is what it is. And I do understand that it's a large number, and that's not lost on me, but I think that we need to spend it, not waste it. There's a difference. This will I think help a lot. So sorry again to interrupt. You brought up a good point.
One thing I did, sorry, let me finish. One thing I did notice was looking at the difference in cost for one PCI from the 1.6 to 2 million. I was astonished at how huge of a jump that is. That's $1 million difference right there. And yes, it's still a difference if you go to the 2.5, but the jump from 1.6 to 2, I was astonished by that. And to me, I mean, it's at the level of $2 million a year. And correct me if I'm wrong, but if we get state funding for like the Maple Ave project,
Right, that would be outside of this.
additional to this
That would
as
be
well.
addition
Yes.
to this.
Which would move the needle further forward even faster.
Correct.
And that is one thing Mary and I have talked about kind of just briefly is our money that we get from the state, the TAR money. I don't want to count on that because it either takes a long time or we don't know when it comes in or if it will come in or.
Sometimes gets cut mid-cycle.
Yeah. So what's nice is to have that, and then we can use that when we have a utility company come in town and say, we're going to do half this road. Do you want us to pave half or do you want to do the whole thing? Well, this lets us do the whole thing without taking away from our current plan. Because right now, we have to take money that we were going to do one road with to match the other road because that makes the most sense because they're there, but that's how roads, well, I thought you were doing my road this year. Yeah, well, that's one of the things that changed. So that letting us hold on to that money for those types of projects and put that with, so we're using state money and utility money, we almost kind of get a road for free. And there's different ways to look at it. I know it's not free, but that's one of the goals with this plan is to utilize it like that, as well as what you said for the Maple Street money.
All I was gonna say is, in general, my second term, the biggest complaints I ever hear are the roads. So I mean, if we don't do this, we're just gonna keep getting complaints. I think most people will be on board with this, because that is the main complaint from townspeople. You know, what are you gonna do with the roads? And like you said, oh, I thought you were gonna do my roads.
Yeah.
Oh, what happened? Why is my road still like, you know? So, yeah, I think this is really important. And I like that you put this out, you know, 5 years. And as Jason said, the difference between just kind of maintaining and getting them up to par, the difference in per mile is, you know, you can't beat that. It's a no-brainer.
I'll have to agree with Patty. I was talking to people and I was mentioning it to my parents. Now, both of them are retired, it's fixed income. And when I mentioned that there's a possibility we might pour more money towards fixing the roads, like, oh, good, because they need it. So,
Yeah.
you know, it's gonna go a long ways because people, I mean, that's really, when you're driving into Killenly, it's the first thing you notice.
Yes.
Is, you know, you drive over the line and you hit a pothole, you're gonna remember, oh, I remember when I went into that town. So, and when I was doing home care and driving on all of it, all
Yeah.
these other towns and everything, you know when you went into a different town sometimes, because the roads were, a lot of times the first thing people see, so.
I'd be interested to see the studies that you were talking about with the correlation with the roads and bringing in business to the town.
Okay.
I'd like to see those studies, and I'd like to see what you plan on. You have a great long-term plan here, but what are you doing? You know what I mean? What is your plan? Do you have certain roads that you're gonna do? Do you have
That's how it increased is because I changed roads as it went. That's how this is developed. Like, I mean,
I'm saying,
I have
that's
to.
all I'm fine that it's on this one line, but
Yep.
what is it actually, what's the details? Not just, okay, you got a straight line. What are the details? What are you doing for that?
Right, right.
We're giving you
Yeah.
$2.5 million. What are you doing with that $2.5 million? And what are you gonna do with that, with the money if you do have a surplus? Where does that go?
There won't be a surplus.
There won't be a surplus.
There won't be a
for roads,
surplus,
no.
not in
You
this
just said
5
that you're
years.
gonna have state money, right?
State money, and then
that's
that.
gonna be able to bring down the taxes.
No, I just
No.
said that I wasn't gonna do that. That wasn't part of this plan. That's gonna be additional to go on top of when utilities come in and wanna do work.
But
So
that
that'll be
should
additional
decrease-
works.
That should decrease your.
You will,
It should be supplementing what you're actually plan on using if you have state money.
So that could help in the
No.
future be able to get to achieve the higher
Exactly.
rating quicker, and then you can back down off of and get to a maintenance level faster. But you wouldn't offset the state money in this preservation plan from the operating budget, because number one, the state money is typically not available right away. We have almost a year delay in getting that, so we lose a construction cycle on our on any road work that we can do with our with the state money. And it's also subject to mid-year cuts, which means we may not actually get what they initially tell us that we're going to get. So it's really hard to plan a road when you're having to do, he's planning the roads, all of the roads for this upcoming construction cycle for a budget that he hasn't been placed yet, because we're working off of the money from this past fiscal year. He's working now on getting all of those roads in place. And so here's the challenge with giving you a list of roads. That will change. There is no way we can provide a list of roads now to say this is exactly what roads are going to be spent if the town appropriates $2.5 million, because there will be an entire winter season that's going to happen. And that is going to change some of the roads and some of the deterioration on those roads. And so some roads may have to shift.
And that's with that curve, why there was the
And-
range on there. Some roads will fall off faster than others. It's not on this one, it was on the presentation prior. There was a curve where a road could be going along and then it falls off really, really quick. There's some roads in town that are holding a lot longer than they should be, because it's an average of how it works. So you might think a road's gonna fall off at a certain rate and you're gonna peg it for a certain treatment at a certain time, but then you get to that time and it doesn't need it. You can wait longer, and then that lets you go somewhere else. So you can't take and plan out a specific road. I have, again, all these, and the way the models ran, I have how many miles of each treatment that this projects out to do. But that changes. It works out to be, it cuts into segments of roads to average it out, and that's how the industry projects far on a whole road network. But there's sections where sometimes you'll have, 4.25 miles of reconstruction. Well, if you don't have a road that's 4.25 long, or a bunch of roads that add up to it, sometimes you don't want to hop around. You don't want to do 800 feet here and then move 3 roads over and then do 600 feet there. That's not how you would do it. You would try to join it together. So that's where this is a projection on what you can get to. There may be some years that dip a little bit lower than what this shows, and then some higher, but this is how the funding works on average throughout the whole time.
So, and I appreciate the want to be able to give, here's the list of roads that's going to be able to get repaired, right? And so, in probably the next month or so, I'm going to start giving you in my manager report a list of road construction that's going to start taking place, right? We're going to start with Cranberry Bog here shortly. We're going to start doing and so you're going to hear the list that's coming out of the funding that we're expending from the current fiscal year, right? That the money that we get appropriated, that gets appropriated for next fiscal year, will be spent next construction cycle in 2023. There's a lot that happens on a road between now and then, and it could change between now and then. So when you publish a list of, well, in 2023, we're going to do all of these roads and these are the applications, and then something shifts, the residents have an expectation, and there may be a higher public safety need to address another road.
And one other thing with the state money that we would use, we wouldn't just save it and wait till a utility company coming in. That is money that we would then look to, say, straightening a curve or filling a dip, like was done on Rock Ave 9 years ago or 8 years ago. There's look at certain spots of Bailey Hill that need to be widened for sightline and safety. So that is what we would utilize that state money for, along with matching utility money. But this is just more so for the actual pavement preservation. And as you got higher up on this, it can be easier to plan it out. Once a road's repaved, you can tell people we'll be back to 2 to 3 years for a fog seal, and then another 2 years after that for a crack seal, and then another 4 years after that for a chip seal or a micro. Like, those are a lot more, you can plan out a lot longer once they're, it's same as a car. It's easier to know what your repairs are when it's in good shape, because there's books and they go by that. Roads are the same way. When they're worse, you don't know exactly what you're going to have to do and what you're going to have to spend it on and when. But you have to have the amount of money available it works out. It works out to be the average. This covers the cost of those roads popping up that you're not sure which ones they're going to be, as well as maintaining the ones that are ready to be maintained on a regular schedule.
So this money will only, $2.5 million will only go to the roads?
Yes.
And it won't
Correct.
get floundered out to some other budget?
It can't.
Item?
So it
No.
can't.
So
So
it
once
has
it's
to go to
appropriated
roads,
to the roads, it has to go to the roads.
Flagging, has to go to chip seal.
Yep.
Has
Correct.
to go to.
There will be some drainage work probably that gets involved with it,
That's
but it will
part
be
of
drainage
road.
work based on a project. It won't be there'll be
So it's
say,
all for the road.
Exactly. If we're going to repave a road, but we need to put new basins on it, that will be part of the project.
So once if the town appropriates the funds, it's dedicated within the town's operating budget for roads, for road pavement management. It actually is a transfer to capital projects, and it's under the capital projects in that appropriation. So it can't be used for anything else unless we come back to the town council and ask for a transfer. That's the only way it can be used for something else. So whatever gets put into there can only be used for what qualifies as road pavement management.
And I do look, again, 2 years. I would like to obviously look back at it. If we're making a lot more progress than we expected, you can tune it down. Or at 3 years, you can take and the same point, if there's a year that comes around and you need to do, I hate to say it, but more of a level funding thing because of, hopefully we never have to go through it again, but like the 2020 was, we're at a spot where doing just a year like that doesn't set us as far back as we're currently at. Because that hurt us in 2020. And I understand it made sense why we did it, but it did hurt the roads a lot. And we did lose a lot in 2020. That was a big one of the years that there was a quick drop from our previous 68 that we were at to our 63. And it hurt. But when you're higher up on this, the minimum years don't hurt as bad.
Any other questions? Comments? Now, I just have one question. So if we're planning, like, you pick a road, we're gonna do this road, and then something comes up where you reach out to the utility company, and the utility company says, well, I was planning on doing work there next year. I'm assuming you would put that road off and then find another road to work on to use that funding.
Correct. And there's actually one road right now that we're kind of in a very similar spot where they're thinking they can get it done late summer, and it's going to be borderline for us with if we do it or not. So if it gets to a certain point, we'll probably pull the plug on it, but it'll be the first road next year. If it gets done soon enough and we have enough time, then we'll move it to another road. So unfortunately, this year then wouldn't have as much done as what it would look like, but then the next year you're going to have more. Because that's one thing, once we allot a road, I don't want to change. Once we commit to a road, I don't want to change. And that's where the utility companies have been pretty receptive of what's your timeline, how much time do we have, and then they kind of give you an answer, yes or no, on whether it's worth them getting out there. But for the most part, exactly, if they said we want to do it, but we want to do it next year, we would go somewhere else. Of a similar road. We would try to find a road that's a similar category, obviously for a similar price, and do a similar type of work in the same bracket.
Okay, thank you.
So what is your plan for our drainage system? I hear all kinds of crazy stories about our antiquated drainage system throughout the town, especially the large
The box culvert,
that's,
yeah.
What's our plan for that?
We're still trying to figure out what we need to do to it and where we need to do it. I know the study's still ongoing. We've identified a few spots that are key repairs that a few we can make in-house, a few will have to be contracted out. I know engineering knows a little bit more on the exacts of what that study has come up with so far, and I know it's not done. That's why I'm looking at Mary. She might have a little bit more details on that. Now that one system, before I turn over to Mary, it's not our whole. It doesn't run through the whole town. That is one specific box culvert that runs through the downtown area. That's a little bit different than improving the drainage system throughout town. We do.
I'm talking about that box
Okay.
culvert, because that is a major part.
Yes, it is.
So this budget that you have includes $50,000 use of fund balance to continue the study. We couldn't get all the way through that entire system with the current funding of $40,000. So we've only gotten to about the area of what was formerly Nolly's. It's now, I can't remember the name. Moon Magic. I knew it was Moon something, but I couldn't remember the name of it. So over by Moon Magic, that's about where we've gotten to. The 50,000 will likely bring us all the way to the end of that portion of the drainage system. And then that gives us the full scope of what is the entire condition and what are the immediate needs of that system. We have not proposed any improvements yet into that system, only because we don't know what the other half of the system looks like. And there could be an area that is far more critical than what we've already evaluated. So engineering department is leading that evaluation and will likely lead a good portion of the improvements to that system. One of the tail end of that system is the box culvert at Reynolds Street, across this Reynolds Street that goes from Davis Park over to where the church is. That is slated for replacement in utilizing ARP funds. That's a $795,000 request to the town council that you'll be looking at or hearing public comment on in June and potentially taking action on, and that would replace that box culvert and replace the sewer line down Reynolds Street. And that would address a deteriorated area of that, but the hope is that we would be able to get some of that evaluation.
And that's where things changed, because originally we had plans to do that, part of that box culvert, this construction season, in-house, just the portion that went on Reynolds Street, because Reynolds Street needs to be redone. But then when the study came up, we decided to hold off, as well as the potential for the sewer line being done, because the thing with that box culvert is in Reynolds Street, the water line actually runs through it. I know because I've walked in the box culvert and you have to duck underneath the water line. It goes right in one side and out the other. So we originally first reached out to the water company, and they were they agreed they'd want to do their main in Reynolds Street. So it started there, and we were going to not do the box culvert because we were going to let them do the water main this year. Then we were going to come in when they were out of the way with the pipe that runs through the box culvert wouldn't be there anymore, then let us put a new box culvert in. But then we got looking at the sewer lines and the age of the sewer lines over there, and that's where it got pushed back again.
Right, the sewer main actually bisects the box culvert as well.
It siphons underneath it,
yeah. It goes underneath, and it has some impact to the culvert as well. So once you touch the culvert, you end up touching the sewer main, and the sewer main is so old, you end up chasing that down the street anyway.
It's a clay sewer line.
It's a clay pipe, so.
And it's exposed in the floor of the box culvert. Nothing, you can't see it because it's capped with concrete, but you can see where the concrete to protect the sewer line, to create any seepage either way. And you kind of walk over that, and that was one of the reasons where when we were doing more surveys to see what we could do with the water line, what we had for height and what size box culvert, we discovered the sewer line was in the way, and that brought that up. So that's, again, one of those ways that things change.
Yeah.
And then we went to a different road in town, and that was going to be one of the ones that's taking the place of Reynolds Street for this year.
Right.
So unfortunately, we have to deal with Reynolds Street it's rougher. We know that, but that's one of the reasons why a road like that is held off.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions? I want to thank you for throwing this together. I do understand it, and I completely understand where Mr. Whitehead's coming from as far as we would love to know what roads they are. 'Cause it would be great to have that, but I also understand the logistics of it as far as things get pushed off, things come up. Roads deteriorate faster than others. It'd be great if we had a crystal ball to know what the future is, but unfortunately it doesn't always work like that. But I am glad to see that there's support on the council from my other council members to invest money into our roads in town, especially considering how quickly they've deteriorated over the past 10 years.
Mike, just to clarify, it's not so much a list of roads, it's what are we doing for that $2.5 million? You know, are we replacing X amount, you have percentages here, major rehab, minor rehab, I mean, that's basically, what are we gonna chip seal? How many linear feet we're gonna do,
Yeah, and it's all part of that. So there's different treatments in each band, and that's what we discussed last time. So each band, the price with this band is not an average, but it's built up of what treatments are in each band and what we use primarily. So I have the list for this year, and I started it in, I think I want to say last October, September, and I had a list of what we were doing with what treatment, with a price. And then I have a running total, and it changes from, okay, if I bump it up to this treatment or bump it down to this treatment, what's it do to the road? And it does. It changes throughout the time. And I have a spreadsheet that I keep at the office, and it's an Excel sheet, and it's got different tabs on it for different years. And I run out. I have roads already on for 2024, 2025 that I have, okay, I think at this time this road is going to need this. Keep an eye on it. So I would like that as well. I mean, I could give you, if you gave me $2.5 million, I could come up with a list, but I'm not saying that in 2023 when we actually have the money, that is the exact list that's going to get done. It will be close. The types of treatment will be, the mileage of treatment will be close. But it's not going to be exact. It'll be, and the same thing to go from a micro surfacing to a chip seal. It's a different product. It costs a different price, but it's depending on what road you go on, you would use a different treatment. In more of a neighborhood, we would do more of the micro surfacing and cape seal, which is what we did 2 years ago in Clover Court, Tamarack Circle, and then Pleasant View, I believe it is. And then Pequot and Peekaboo and Pequot were the two roads that we did the micro. And that was the first that was done in this area for a long time. Putnam did it last year, and Putnam's doing more micro this year. We did it then, and we like it, but it's very specific. It's good in the neighborhoods. It's very similar to a chip seal, but it gives you a nicer finish, which is important in neighborhoods with people walking, rollerblading, bikes. On roads that are more rural, we can get away with a chip seal. It gives us a similar preservation, but it's a little bit cheaper and goes on a little quicker. So that's where one of those, I could make a $2.5 million plan. I had one. I don't have it with me, but I have one of what we would do, but there's definitely some fine tuning on it. And that's where the RLS that I talked about last time, the service life, is very important, because that's kind of your goal. If you take a road out and you put another one in with a different type of treatment, it changes that number. So you always you got to be careful, because there's a few times where I've done this for both this presentation, the last presentation, and actual real budgets, where all kind of like, we can probably repave that road this year. And then you put it in, you see what it does to your remaining service life for the network, and it's not necessarily the most responsible thing to do for the network. So you take it out and you put a chip seal in, and then you add a couple crack seal roads, and that gets you more service life. So it's a balance act. In some years, and the 2.5 gives you the flexibility to do that road and still go do preservation. That's why it's more expensive to do bad roads, because you need more money to do them, and you can't just keep taking the preservation stuff, because then we'll end up with like what this shows at the 1.6 million. You're going to end up with half the road network be really, really good and exactly half be really, really low. So you need the little bit more to kind of cover that fluctuation.
So I think I kind of know where you want like a percentage of roads that are going to need the cheaper.
Curious, that's all.
It
You
would
gotta
ju-
remember, we have to be fiscally responsible
Oh,
for
absolutely.
the taxpayers, right? I think it's a great idea, and we definitely need the roads, but like I said before, do we have the money in the budget to do this? Are we gonna increase the taxes would be the biggest thing for what I'm thinking about for the constituents. I mean, everybody's gonna be happy, great, we have awesome roads, this is great, we need it, 100%, but in the same aspect, we have to be responsible to the constituents, because not everybody has that money out there to keep increasing the mill rate.
Right, so that's where we looked at, in the request, we did the evaluation to have a level mill rate. So the scenarios that I prepared for you have no change in the mill rate.
That was straight up,
Yeah,
flat.
the 2.5 million, the only difference is that we increase the amount of fund balance use. So there's no mill rate change. You're increasing the use of activating the fund balance, which is why I also prepared for you that run out on fund balance. What does it look like to do this? Because as Matt has said, this isn't a one-shot deal, right? This is something that the town would need to invest in and be willing to invest in for a couple of years before you start dialing back. what is that level of fund balance use, so that way you're not hitting the mill rate, you're not doing this, I do have where in subsequent years, we start to push some of it into the mill rate, and that's something that could be considered each year individually, right? It's not something that the council has to act on now, but just in those projections to look at, and I took small numbers that would move into the mill rate. So $100,000 is a small amount to move into the mill rate, as opposed to moving $500,000 or $600,000 into the mill rate in one given point in time. 600,000 is just under half a mil, right? So, so what you have before you, both of the scenarios that I prepared, based on the information that I received, have 0 mill rate impact, where you're activating more use of fund balance, and it's a matter of how much this body wants to activate and present to the townspeople for use of fund balance at the town meeting.
So I do have a question. When is our next reevaluation for the town?
The next revaluation is for October 1st of 2023.
Okay.
So we'll be getting ready to go into reval.
So what happens, say our mill rate's, what is it, 24?
It's 25.
25. So what happens when your house is typically assessed, just round numbers, at $100,000, and this year, when they do the reevaluation, it's gonna be $200,000?
Yeah,
So
so,
what happens then?
yeah,
It
in a
all
year of,
depends on budget.
Well-
It's all on the council. It's,
so if I can explain a little bit of how it happens. So when a revaluation occurs, all that does, so that doesn't automatically mean that the same mill rate is gonna apply. So when I did the public presentation, the bars that I coded orange for the public hearing, during the public hearing, I indicated those were revaluation years. So typically, when your grand list increases, your mill rate declines, right? So what we do is, every time I've gone through a mill rate, revaluation, I always reflect to the town council, if nothing changed, the grand lists provided this change, and this is what the mill rate calculation would be with the new grand list. So and typically, so we're anticipating, unless the markets change dramatically in the next, year and a half, unless the markets change dramatically and there's a big pop in the bubble, right? We're expecting that there's likely going to be an increase in the grand list because of the increase in pressure in the market, right? That would mean that coming forward to the council in the budget, I would give you exactly what is the decreased mill rate. And then the council would make decisions, because as with every year, there is inflationary items like utilities and all those things that we bring to you as increases to the budget, but you would know what the amount of that value revaluation decrease is. So if everything stayed the same, this is how much the residents' mill rate would be, and you would be then paying the same amount in taxes.
Okay.
Right? So a revaluation isn't about generating more revenue for the town, it's about rebalancing the equity among the taxpayers. That's what a revaluation is. And so that's why your mill rate calculation has to reflect what that change is in that value. If we had a year that the grand list dropped, that meant the mill rate had to go up. It didn't mean that everybody was paying more in taxes because the mill rate went up. It just meant that the property values dropped. And so they ended up paying the same amount in taxes because the mill rate increased in the rate number because their value decreased. So when you have the opposite happen, when your property value increases, the mill rate decreases based on that value. So it's really just redistributing equitably across the town. It's not about changing somebody's property taxes. But again, during that year, as with every budget year, there's also budgetary asks that come to the council on the Board of Ed side as well on the town side, and that would ultimately determine if somebody has a mill rate impact, has a property
makes
tax.
sense.
And there was two things actually that, while Mary was talking, that it brought up. One is that I did account for some inflation with this. So this is a $2.5 million that the funding number stays the same across for 6 years, but this is including inflation on materials. hopefully. Again, oil, being in this, oil's a big part of it, and oil can fluctuate a lot. But there is, in these models, there is some inflation built into it. So that hopefully will help. And then another thing is if we did the 1.6, like I said when I started, that was to maintain. So if you put that in now and then want to start dialing it back into the mill rate, I'm also going to come and, again, because I believe that this is what is the best benefit to town. I understand what you said about trying to be fiscally responsible. To me, this is the best decision that will make the town better. I know some people, the taxes are a hard hit, but look how many people you guys get complaining about the roads. So just for every one person that doesn't want the taxes to go up, how many people are there that, if they saw the difference, would say, I'd rather drive on nice roads? I think that's a silent majority. I mean, I could be wrong. But I just know from my personal experience and stuff how that goes. So if you go higher, this stays. And this is where you can start, as you start to dial that back, maybe you take a little bit more out of fund balance, but you don't necessarily put it into the mill rate 1 year. Because then you can, once you get to the 30-year out, that's where you can start dialing your funding back. So if you just start potentially taking it out of fund balance, you don't necessarily have to add the same amount back into mill rate. Again, that's not the first couple of years, but that's down the road what would be the target. It wouldn't necessarily always be a 1-to-1 taking out of the mill rate, taking out of the fund balance to put in the mill rate. You should be able to start transitioning that. Then this spike might taper off a little bit. You might not end up at a 77, but again, once you're up there, it's easier to operate in that higher range.
So looking at, if you were looking at percentages of your preventative, the cheaper fixes.
Yes.
This year is more like a 40-60, but if we were to increase to the 2.5, for this next year, would it be more closer to the 50-50 and then continue up to that 60-40 after that?
Let me see what I have here, if I have a breakdown on the specifics. So the 2.5,
But
yeah.
it will eventually it'll make that shift.
It shifts over time, right? So over the 5-year period is where you start to see the movement shift from the,
From the 40-60
where we're kind of in the wrong direction. We start flipping those percentages to the correct direction, right? So I
Yeah.
don't know that it's gonna, that we're gonna quite reach 50-50 next year. It might not be until the following year, but then you start to see the shift in the other direction.
There, I got it. So it looks like next year we'd be pretty close to a 50-50 with this 2.5.
Okay.
We'd be at a
Okay.
48 routine and preventative, and then a 52 reconstruction. So we're starting to make that swing. The next year we're at a 60 in the preservation, and then a 40 else, and that's where you start to, it won't take too long, a few years of being able to kind of, so like this shows reconstruction will be at close to the bottom two. Major rehabilitation and reconstruction will be about 7.5 miles next year with this, which is, we have a 121-mile network, and to do 7 miles of completely brand new roads is a good chunk. This current year, with what we have with the 1.4, we're going to be about 5.5, so that's that much of a jump on that. And this year, I think, will make a big difference with the amount of new roads. It'll be the largest amount of new roads we've had in town for a long time. So I think that with this will help sell this more, I believe.
I think probably the easiest is with a car, because everybody
Yeah.
understands you change your filters, you change your oils and your fuels and that, fluids. Your car is gonna go 10, 15 years, whereas if you didn't do any of that, you're gonna blow your engine, so.
And not to pick on anybody in particular, but most people will. There's some people that we see them every snowstorm, they have no tread on their tires, and it's fine, they're still holding air. And that's the same as this. That's the same as this when it comes to roads.
No, I had tread on my tires.
They're not going to necessarily want to invest in it because they'll just keep going, it's fine. And I'm not picking on you, that wasn't directed at you, but.
So, my thing would be, it would be nice to see what happens after this point here.
Yeah, I think.
I think that would give people a realistic, that let that see that equal out and to come to a level playing field, you know what I mean? And so we're investing all this money into the roads to get to a certain location, a certain plateau or whatever, it'd be nice to see what that dollar amount is gonna be moving forward.
Yeah.
With inflation, it'll probably be more, but
And no, I agree with you, to be honest, and I think that's why I keep kind of mentioning it. I know Mary mentioned, to be honest, if this goes, which again, it's projected, the biggest thing is inflation on the material price, how much work we can get done. But 2025 is probably where we would look to start to split to change the total amount. Again, and that could depend on maybe the taxpayers at that point really notice the difference and they want to keep going, because that is a potential. I know it sounds odd, but it could be. Or at that point, that's where you start to dial it back and you take where it's not a one-to-one from the mill rate to you're not increasing it the same. But it would, in theory, once we got to 75, we would probably try to just slow down a little bit and maintain. It would be nice to go higher, but once we got to 75, that's where we could probably it would be fiscally responsible if we decided to fund less. I think right now, that's not obviously by what it costs per PCI. I think that shows you that even though it's more money, it's not necessarily the most responsible thing to spend less. But once you get a little higher, then that number would change. To do 1.6 isn't going to cost 2.6 million if your starting point is higher. And again, I could try to project it out. It does get difficult once you start projecting past 3 years. The uncertainties are tricky. The deterioration curve is trickier to project at that point. I mean, I can run some numbers, but it's kind of like predicting the weather at that point. Once you get a certain distance out, it's a lot harder. You can comfortably do it within a short amount of time, but the further out you get, you have an idea, but it's not necessarily as accurate.
I just have one question. Based on the fact that right now we're only dealing with the 22 to 23 budget, if I understand this graph correctly, if we were to fund it at the 2.5 million, we would be looking at, so that money would be expended in a 2023 year.
Summertime, yep.
Summertime.
Yep.
So this one, because it shows years post-construction season, if we appropriate the 2.5, so we would end up, the number we would be looking at would be where we're at the end of the 23?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes, yep.
Because the one thing I did look at was, there's a substantial difference between the 1.6 or the 2 million compared to the 2.5 million over that 1 year period. I mean, that's 2 PCI we're picking up right there, which, I mean, right now we do have a very solid general fund. We have had a lot of turnbacks over the past few years, and it's taxpayer money. I mean, it's not like we're asking the taxpayers for more money if we're pulling the money out of the general fund. It's already money that the town taxpayers have voted for the town to use.
Yes.
So.
And that is also one reason why I know what I asked for in the original budget, but like I said when I started, I understood at the point it was going straight to mill rate. And again, I was aware of that. But this is why with this, I was actually very happy to have this opportunity to talk to you guys again if you were going to do that. My thing was to say not just do the minimum. If you're going to utilize some of that money that the taxpayers have already put out that had been turned back, this would be, in my opinion, a very, very good use of it.
Yeah, I'm glad to see this because it gives us something to look at. Is if we expend additional money on the roads this year, what will we realistically be looking at? Bang for your buck, in a sense.
Yes.
And how much of a difference does it make between the 1.6, the 2.5 million? And like I said, I understand we're just dealing with this year's budget, and who knows what's going to happen next year.
Exactly. Yep.
But the fact that we have a strong general fund right now, and we have the ability to do this to at least bump us up some and get us in a better position, I think it would be a great idea. And I myself hadn't contemplated going to a 2 million level, but looking at how much more bang for our buck we get just from that $500,000 increase over 1 year, my opinion is I think it's, as Patty said, it's a substantial increase, and it would be worth it.
Whenever the council is ready, I can give you we did give you a proposed resolution for tonight. I can give you numbers to fill in, because clearly those numbers are blank right now. Whenever you're, I don't know when I know you're still in deliberation process, but we can provide numbers whenever the group is ready for numbers.
Jason.
So, when I look at the long-term thing, Mary, does that affect our credit? You guys always talk about your credit.
Yeah, so that's one of the reasons, what's the biggest reason why we do that, projection. And to be able to articulate to the credit rating agencies that this is a planned several-year long-term investment and the use of the funds, and we have already evaluated at what point we need to transition off of that. I don't think that it'll have an impact on our credit rating because it is a thoughtful and purposeful use, and it's planned out, right? And so we're using that as a plan, and we're monitoring it very closely each year to make sure that fund balance isn't getting completely tapped out, right? But it's that planned utilization for a built-up fund balance that you can then expend. And it's capital-wise, it's used for capital purposes as opposed to operational, which they prefer that
Good, good. No,
as
I
an
didn't know
option.
that. Awesome. And I had just one more question, Jason, for him. Like, I notice to go from 1.5 million to 2.5 million, like, it's easy on a piece of paper. Like, how does that work with your workforce? Is it all in-house and you can easily jump that much and you don't have trouble?
It will be a lot of work. We're experiencing it now. We're definitely full out, which is fine. It's good. The guys are working really hard. We have a very good group of people. When we get to the 2.5, to be efficient, we may have to look at making part of this projects that we do hire out. Again, it will be all built into this budget. It's not going to be an additional ask. It's not going to be more money that we need. It would come out of this. Obviously, we'd like to do everything in-house for a couple of reasons. One, it makes more that can go towards the actual pavement of the roads. Two, it's kind of a pride thing because we do a lot more than a lot of other towns do in-house when it comes to this type of work, and keep that up. And there's not really a reason to change if we can keep that up. And like I said, we have a good group. We do a lot of this type of work. For the most part, a lot of the guys really do enjoy doing this type of work. It does get full. Like this time of year, we're preparing a lot of roads for the paving that we're going to do on Cranberry Bog, Furnace, Franklin, and East Franklin are all scheduled to begin in the middle of May. So we're trying to do basin work on those, as well as our spring cleanup list from the winter, fixing our curb, fixing that. So it definitely is a balancing act for sure, but I don't foresee it being a hang-up at all.
Any more questions, comments?
Just a question for Mary in regards to the credit. Do they take into consideration how much money has been returned to the general fund?
Yes, and that's part of the information that we articulate to them is that I review with them how much we have dedicated from fund balance to various budgets, and then how much has been returned each year. So they do look at that, and as long as we're monitoring that cycle, they typically, don't necessarily have an issue with the use of that fund balance in an upcoming budget year, given that this is for capital purposes and not necessarily just operational. We will expect to expend it, which means either operationally we're going to be turning back more money to lessen the amount of impact, but it's not likely that we're going to see an increase in fund balance, right? Because we are going to use fund balance, but it's being used in a purposeful manner and a planned manner. So I wouldn't see an issue with our credit rating agencies because we have, we've given to you tonight that 5-year lookout period to see, what's the sustainability of that. And so we can articulate that plan and that deliberation by the council to them. And so that should be fine.
One other one for you. Now, I know the state usually has like a minimum on fund balance that they like us to hold on to.
That's actually more
Or that
by the
credit.
credit rating agencies, but it's really the minimum that we really want to see is 15%. We do have a budget. We do have a fund balance policy that the town adopted quite a number of years ago at this point, but our minimum threshold is 15. So we would want to be cognizant of that bottom number, that bottom threshold number, because we need to be responsive to any potential emergencies that may arise throughout the community. So really that 15% is our bottom threshold. We do have a number of years before we would potentially be reaching that threshold with this level of investment. And so there's enough time for the town to pivot, for the council to decide to do something differently and pivot before we reach that threshold.
And we do have that amount in contingency that's plugged into the budget already, correct?
Yeah, so the contingency amount is $250,000, and that typically is to manage those unforeseen items that arise in the given fiscal year. And that's typically been used for, shoveling roofs, or, a major boiler repair that, we had to replace, or a hot water heater that has to get replaced that, you don't normally budget for catastrophic, right? You budget for what you need to do for operational, and that's what that contingent line is used for. If we've had a massive failure with a vehicle and we have to replace a vehicle mid-cycle and there's not enough in the CNR, right? Those are the type of things that we've typically utilized the contingency for in a given year. Your fund balance would really be more for you lose a bridge in the middle of the year, and it's a critical, pass-through area, and it has to be redone right away, and we need to trigger the use of fund balance, right? Or you have some other major catastrophic that has to be managed immediately without necessarily being able to go through the process of requesting the ability to bond, bonding authorizations, right? But you have to just manage it. That's why the 15% in your fund balance. And that is, that still keeps us at a credit rating where we're at right now. If we were to drop below the 15%, then we could potentially see some credit rating impact, right? We wouldn't really get to what I would consider a subpar credit rating until we get below 10%. But our threshold, again, for our fund balance policy is 15.
Now, Mary, you had said we're a double A plus.
AA+. Yep. And that's really, so for Killingly, so there's really, the next level up is a AAA, right? That's the best quality you can get. But Killingly likely is not going to be able to get to a AAA because of the amount of state grant funding that we receive, right? So AA+ is really almost the highest credit rating that we're going to be able to get. And really the reason why we have that credit rating is because of our long-term planning process. Because the councils and the councils before you have been very cognizant of long-term planning. Our finance department and our departments collectively look at and trend out what those demands and needs are going to be for a longer period of time. We've set up specific reserves to manage long-term commitments and long-term requirements, and the townspeople have been willing to fund those long-term commitments over time, and so we've been able to maintain a very healthy fiscal position, and we are viewed as very stable by the credit rating agencies because of that long-term commitment to these processes.
Any other comments, questions? Thank you for this presentation.
Thank you, guys.
So I know I did mention that I would be in favor of especially looking at this chart and seeing how much of a difference we get bang for our buck if we go to a 2.5 million for this one fiscal year. And like I said, that is just for this year's budget. This doesn't lock subsequent budgets in at that 2.5 million. If something happened where grand list dropped substantially, for whatever reason, or other issues came up, and during the next budget process, that's something that can always be scaled back. As much as I would hate to see it happen, this is not like we're locking in at 2.6 million forever going forward. This is, or 2.5 million. This is this 1 year. It does get us quite a bit ahead of where we would be at 1.6 or 2 million. And the fact that we've had so much turn back recently, I think it's a wise use of fund balance. And I will.
Also, at the meeting the other night, Mr. Angeli did state that he forecasts next year being similar to this year on COVID for funds being returned. He did forecast a pretty high amount for next year too. So I'm pretty confident.
I'm also comfortable with that. We're being fiscally responsible and not holding the town, to increase the mill rate, so we're using the money appropriately.
I just have questions, about what's coming procedurally so that I understand are we voting, like what's happening here?
Basically, what, this is the deliberation process where we look at, what we wanna present, what changes we wanna make to the town manager proposed budget, to the Board of Ed, proposed budget. And what we decide will then go to the annual town meeting. Basically, members of the public, taxpayers, can make changes at that point, can discuss at that point. And then after, whatever goes from there then goes to the machine-wide referendum town vote.
Okay, so at that point, that's when we vote, or they vote first, like, what happens there?
We
Like, I'm
would,
confused.
any changes we wanna make, we make tonight.
So you'll be voting on a resolution. So the resolution that's in your package doesn't have numbers in it. So today, you're gonna set those numbers. So we're looking to have you determine exactly what the town government number is going to be. So if you wanna increase the road pavement number to the 2.5 million, I have what that total general government number needs to be. And then whatever deliberation you have with the Board of Education number, you will set a new number for the Board of Education tonight. And then we'll fill that into that resolution with the new combined total. That resolution, we update the budget book to reflect whatever it is comes out of that decision tonight, so you will be voting on that tonight. That then gets presented to the annual town meeting. So on May 2nd, I will present similar slides to what I did at the public hearing. However, it will be reflective of the town council's budget at this point in time, because now it'll be the town council's budget. The townspeople will be able to, in town meeting, modify the expenditure numbers. So they can increase or decrease line items within the town government budget and the bottom line total number for the Board of Education. Whatever is decided at town meeting, by that vote of the people at the town meeting, those numbers go to the referendum machine vote for the town people to vote on. And once the townspeople vote on it collectively, the new number that's set by town meeting, if there is a new number, there's been plenty of town meetings that nothing gets changed, but that number then goes to the machine vote for everyone to vote at the polling locations. So there's two questions on the budget. There's two questions on the ballot. One is the town's government budget number. The second one is the Board of Ed. If one passes, it remains passed. If both pass, then we're done. It's all passed. If one fails or both fail, it comes back to the town council. The town council then does this deliberation again. You set new numbers for whatever budget budget did not pass the referendum. You set a new number. That goes to a reconvened town meeting. Nobody can change anything at that. At the reconvened town meeting, nobody can change anything. It's very much like a public hearing. People can get up and speak, but nobody can make any changes. And the number that the town council set is what goes to a referendum. And that continues to happen until until both numbers are passed.
Some years it's a very long budget season.
So what's confusing?
So I just want to, if we vote tonight,
Yep.
this is the number that's going,
Yep.
and something else happens on the floor, can
Yep.
we change what we vote on tonight?
Anyone can, whether
No.
it's someone in the public.
So we're locked in now.
So if something changes on the floor at the town meeting, right? That is the new number that goes. You don't get to then deliberate again and change your decision here, right? So you are sending the town council, as council members are deciding what goes to the town meeting. The town meeting floor has the ability to change that number. They can have the ability to disagree, and if there's enough people in the room that disagree and vote in a positive manner, then that number changes. And a new number goes to the referendum floor, goes to the actual ballot. So, yes, the town council can change, your number can get changed. You don't get a second shot before it goes to referendum to change.
Now,
If it
Now-
fails, then it comes back to you and you have another shot.
now, one thing I want to ask, just for clarification purposes. Anyone, and I believe short of the moderator, whether they're a taxpayer, a council member, a Board of Ed member, can make a motion during the town meeting to amend anything that's
Correct.
amendable.
Anyone
So
who
it
is
doesn't-
an eligible voter of the town meeting can make a motion to modify or amend anything on the table. And the motion, so if a motion is made and seconded, just like in here, somebody can also ask to decide that they want to try and amend that motion,
Yes.
right? So once you get into the town meeting floor, once you get into the town meeting mode, you as council members just become another member of the electorate, right? You become just another taxpayer, right? You no longer hold the same status as town council member, right? Same with Board of Ed members. They become the same as everyone else on the floor, right? As far as being able to make motions and vote, right? All of you have the same, because you're all taxpayers and on the grand list for more than $500 of assessed value, right? Or 1,000. Is it 1,000? 1,000. It's 1,000. Either way, it's little, right? Or a registered voter, right? You have to be a registered voter, or you have to have a grand list value of more than 1,000.
Yeah, right, so, okay, so I see what's going on. So after we vote here, we're kind of stuck to it, we bring it to them, we present, it goes to the general population, they can override or do
Yep.
whatever they'd like, and we can make proposals there too, but then that's for the entire population to vote on.
Absolutely.
Okay,
And they can line item everything on the town side, but not on the Board of Ed. They can only change the
Yeah.
bottom number.
Right.
okay. All right, so for me personally, I kind of would feel more comfortable with the 2 million because we don't know what's going to happen. Like if we're going for a flat mill rate, anything can happen, so I wouldn't want to get stuck. How much would it be
One
with
thing
the 850,000 versus 350,000?
One thing that could always happen, if something gets changed, something gets added, and council members don't feel comfortable with whatever increase is added, if any increases are added anywhere in the budget, then a council member can make a motion to, in consideration of this got changed or increased, we want to reduce this on this item, and then that will go out to vote for everyone as well. Yes.
But if the Board of Education was increased, then we would be stuck with that increase and would be, therefore, be stuck with a mill increase.
Unless at the deliberation and setting of the mill rate, which happens at a separate meeting,
Yep.
the town council then comes together. It's okay. This is all a new process. So after the expenditure numbers are set, the town council then convenes to set the mill rate. Usually it's done at one of your regular meetings if it's possible. When you meet for that one, the town council has the ability to decide to activate the more use of fund balance to offset potential mill rate impact. So only the town council can activate the use of fund balance. They can't do it from the town meeting floor. But the town council can do that in your deliberations of setting the mill rate. So you can purposely decide to set the mill rate at a certain level because you're activating additional use of fund balance in order to offset that mill rate.
But you're still pulling another X
Whatever
dollars
comes out
of
of fund. Which you may decide that you don't do, that may just determine at what point, whether it's the year after or the following year, that you dial back on pavement management, right? Depending on what that looks like.
Jason. I think too, if we go with the 2.5 and let's say it passes, and people start seeing what Matt has talked about, oh, well, look at how nice this, all these roads that we got done this past year. I think seeing is believing. I think once we start the process, I think they'll understand that it's, I mean, let's not end up like, these towns and these cities that have bridges that are falling apart, let's be a trendsetter. I know Killenly hasn't historically been in that position, but as a Killenly Redmond and spending my entire life in this town, I think we're trendsetters. We do a lot of things that a lot of towns don't have the nerve to do. So I'm definitely, I mean, not that I'm not looking to sway you one way or the other, but I think, let's put Killenly on the map for something positive. And that we're going to take care of our infrastructure and we're going to be responsible. I mean, the Board of Ed's turned back over, almost $4 million in the last 2 years? So if we can use it to make our roads better and it doesn't impact the fund balance to that point that we get in trouble and we lose our AA plus, then I think that's a responsible use.
And if I may, just with regards to what happens on the town meeting floor, typically when people are making motions to increase numbers in the town operating budget or in the Board of Education operating budget, typically somebody asks, what's the impact to mill rate, right? And so we very quickly, I've been in Jen's seat where I have done the quick calculations to try and determine exactly what the impact is. So that gets communicated out on the town meeting floor. We want to add $300,000 to whatever. What's the impact to mill rate? So people go in and it gets communicated to the public in the time between the town meeting and the referendum that the number that's put out by town meeting has an impact to mill rate. Because the council has not deliberated. You have not determined whether or not you want to activate fund balance. And so it has gone out with the communication that if there is an increase in any of the numbers, it is an increase to mill rate. It is solely borne by mill rate. And people, there has been times that they have still, passed it regardless because they felt was important enough that they wanted to pay the additional tax.
And to your comment, I think we'd be better served by not increasing the mill rate and let them see what's happening to the roads. I don't believe if we increase the mill rate and then wait for them to see what the impact on the roads.
But I think the numbers we're looking at right now are with a 0 mill increase, correct?
That's as of today.
Correct.
But that doesn't mean at the meeting
Well,
that
at
they don't increase the Board of Education budget.
At the meeting, they could decide to cut the roads and give money to the Board of Ed, and that's their prerogative. But, I think to be responsible counselors, I think we should listen to, Matt's a pretty smart guy. He's done a lot of research, he's done a lot of work, he's been on those roads, he worked in DPW.
We also have to be fiscally responsible.
And I think
for our
we are.
constituents. Well, if we increase the mill rate.
But we're not
after
gonna be
past years,
increasing the mill
you
rate.
say that now, but
So to
You
be clear.
You can't see what you're gonna do in 2 years.
So to be clear, the town council isn't, when it gets to the town meeting floor, and the town meeting floor changes the number, it's not the town council increasing the mill rate.
No,
The
it's
townspeople are
taxpayers.
voting on that, and it gets voted on in referendum vote by the townspeople. That's not necessarily the town's council changing the mill rate. That's the people that are making the decision that they want to increase the expenditure number.
but we're making that decision right now, basically.
Our decision, what we've been discussing is putting 2.5 million into the roads.
and putting forward a budget that would have a 0 mil increase. So that's as far as we can go as the town council. Beyond that, it goes to everyone who's at the annual town meeting. We don't have control over what goes on at the annual town meeting unless we're the only ones in the room. It's up to anyone who comes in can make changes at that point. So we just have to do what we, as council members, what we believe is best. I would like just to add in some of the things I've heard over this past year. The biggest things I've heard are, why is the Board of Ed asking for more money when they keep turning money back every year? Why are we sitting on all this money in the general fund? Why aren't we spending it? Why aren't we using it to reduce mill rate? I mean, it was the biggest complaints I've had. I have always this past year have been the fact that the Board of Ed budget keeps increasing. I'm looking at numbers in front of me. If you look at compared from the 2011-2012 budget year to now, the Board of Ed budget is $8 million more than it was
Right,
then.
because it could have been flat from 2015-16 year. Could have been flat right through, and we still would have ended up at a pretty much an even keel.
But
But
even in the year,
It keeps going up. No, I agree.
And based on
Right.
MBR, you can't reduce
Right.
the Board of Ed budget. The other thing looking at is between what's been turned back in that time frame, and that doesn't include where we're at right now. We're looking at, if you add what's been turned back and what's been put in a non-lapse account, you're looking at roughly $8 million. So, and I understand the taxpayers and the comments that have been made to me by my constituents, is we're spending all this money on Board of Ed, but we're still an Alliance district. We're spending all this money on the Board of Ed, but the money gets turned back. Why do we keep increasing this budget? Now, the town council, we can't tell the Board of Ed how to spend their money. That's not up to us. The only thing we can do is set a number that goes forward to the annual town meeting. And based off all the comments that have been made to me regarding the Board of Education budget, I have a figure that I'm gonna ask for a motion at a certain figure, and then let it go to annual town meeting and see what happens there.
And besides the 8 million, they have the 2 million non-lapsing, and they got almost $4 million in ESSER funding. So why are we looking for an increase when I just, no.
And that was the other thing that was brought up to me is, I've heard from almost everyone that I've talked to regarding the budget, that all the money you've gotten from all the grants, that there's no reason we should put a mill rate increase into the budget. And I completely understand that. I mean, we've got the general fund available where we can put money into the roads, where the budget that I've talked with all of you about, and we've talked about bringing forward, is a 0 mil increase, but still putting money into the roads. And then we also have the presentation that was brought to us tonight. I know none of us had ever discussed a 2.5 million in the roads, but looking at the bang for the buck we get going from the 2 million to 2.5, I am in favor of that. And it's something we're bringing forward with a long-term goal, with a plan, and for this year would be a flat mill rate.
You had mentioned Maple Street. Now, you said you were gonna, and I'm probably gonna say the wrong fund, but it's the ESSER fund that's actually gonna pay for that? What fund
LOTSIP.
is that?
LOTSIP, it's a DOT grant funding, LOTSIP.
Okay. What are we
It's a local
doing with all our funding?
So-
Can portion of that go to the roads as well? or-
So we have, that's the American Rescue Plan Act funding that you have received. You received that this last
Yeah.
one. So it has all of the applications in it, and we have about $1 million more in applications than we have funding. We're not getting any more than the 3.9 million. So, I think that money is well documented as to where the none of it has gone anywhere right now because the council hasn't taken any action on that, but that's what's before the council now.
Mary, you said
June 14th is when you're doing the public hearing. But you guys set the public hearing at this last meeting. You set your
Right,
public
but there's
hearing.
a proposal in there for, what is it, Reynolds Street?
Reynolds Street.
Five.
Yeah, Reynolds Street is doing yeah, that's part of that's a major road reconstruction.
And that's
So-
part of that.
ARP, that's an ARP request. That's in front of everyone for consideration.
So I guess I'm not at all against 2.5 million for the roads, but what I'm nervous about, because I don't quite get the procedures, getting stuck with a mill rate increase. So am I allowed to ask people, like, if something crazy happens from the floor, are people going to be okay going to the general fund for the extra amount? How do people feel about
One thing that
that?
can always get questioned, anytime someone wants to add money, someone makes a motion, someone seconds it, then there's discussion. During that discussion, anyone can ask, what's that gonna impact the mill rate? And and you could even further ask, if this increase goes through and the council were to decide to use general funds to offset that, what would that do to the general fund?
And that's where I can.
Yes.
Right, so we do the evaluation really quick on the fly as to what's the impact to fund balance.
No, but I'm saying now, do people can I get a feel for that? Like, how would people feel if that were to happen? Is that something I can ask now?
You mean your
I
fellow
think-
council
Yeah,
members?
yeah.
Oh, yeah, you can ask your
Yeah.
fellow
Council
council
Like,
members
how would you
that
guys
during deliberation.
feel, like, if that happened? Are you ready to go to the general fund so we don't get a flat,
So
we
I
can
would,
keep a flat mill rate?
I would have this piece of paper and reiterate how much money the BOE has returned.
Well, all right.
But-
Now,
But this is all
ha-
money that
hang
you
on,
put back
hang
in
on,
the general
hang on. We don't know if anyone's gonna add a penny to any of these items.
What
Yep.
I would say.
I wouldn't
Sorry, go ahead.
deliberate on, tonight, I wouldn't deliberate on what if this happens. We need to decide on what we wanna put forward. This is us putting forward what as council members we feel is best for the town. The best way to spend the taxpayers' dollars. Because even a general fund, that's still taxpayers' dollars. That's not the town's money. That's all coming from our taxpayers. So, and I know all of us have heard from our taxpayers. And I've brought up what's been brought up to me, and I can only assume that similar comments have been made to the other council members as well. So I wouldn't, be so concerned with what if this happens? Like I had just mentioned, if someone wants to add something, bring up to it can come up for discussion. Bring up the discussion. What is this gonna impact the mill rate if this gets added in? What would this impact the general fund if the town council, goes and decides to bring more money out of the general fund to cover any additions? But the thing you always have to make sure that the public is aware of is just because that money's there in a general fund, if there's an increase, doesn't mean the town council is going to use that general fund money to not have a mill rate increase. If someone adds $1 million to anything, then it's up to the council afterwards, but we need to make sure that the public is aware, if you add this much in, this is what you could be looking at it for an increased mill rate.
Why wouldn't we add that additional 500,000 at that time? What is the procedure with that? I mean, does the one budget go before the other budget, or how does that work?
So the town meeting floor deliberates on the town's operating budget first. So any modifications and changes happen to the town operating budget, and it's only the expenditure budget.
I mean, you can
They don't touch
answer
the
my
revenues.
question.
Yep,
I got you.
so it's only the bottom, that number.
I got you.
Okay.
One thing I would say is no matter what happens at the public hearing, it goes to referendum. So if the
Yep.
town's not happy with what comes out of that public hearing, when they go and vote, I mean, you have to show up and vote. Either you want the budget or you don't. But at that point, as far as I'm concerned, it's out of our hands. Just, you have to go vote. If you want that to go through, then, and on the same token, if you are comfortable with what we passed tonight, and you don't want anything changed, then show up at the public hearing. So anything that tries to get added, you can vote it down. So, I mean,
And
effectively, you have to show up.
And whatever changes, if there are any changes that happen at the town meeting floor, when the budget is reproduced prior to the referendum, it is reproduced with the assumption that there's a mill rate impact.
Yes. Yes.
So it's automatically assumed there's a mill rate impact. So the townspeople will know that there's the possibility that there's going to be a mill rate impact based on whatever that, so if they're not happy with that potential mill rate impact, they would vote however they feel at the polls in making that decision. So when it comes back to the council could, in setting the mill rate, once everything passes, the council could decide
To take from.
to take from the fund balance to lessen it. Okay.
And just so if, when numbers start getting thrown around, a mill in the town of Killenly is worth approximately 1.2 million. If you were in Pomfret, forget it. Yeah. Yeah.
All right, so at this point, Ms. Calorio, if the, where are we?
Are you looking on the town's budget, the town's number?
So for,
General
if the Board of
government.
Ed number is 45,029,799,
Correct.
and we were to go with the 2.5 million,
The general
For the-
government budget?
what would the general government be and what would the total be if we were to do the 2.5 million to the roads?
General government would be $19,809,065. 19,809,065. For a total, when everybody's there, total $64,838,864. 64,838,864. It is like bingo. I feel like a bingo caller, except I didn't get to say B first.
And those numbers would, based off the grand list, equal a 0 mil increase.
So that would provide a 0 mill rate increase, and that would activate for use of fund balance $2,045,000. So we will adjust the revenues to reflect the increased use of fund balance. We will also reflect the increase in the pavement management, in the capital projects probably line for the pavement management. And that would maintain a 0 mill increase. So it would be, the mill rate would stay the same.
I do have one question, and I apologize for not asking you this when we spoke the other day. Because this was posed to me over the weekend by several people. Looking at the grand list, either I'm reading it wrong, or it looks like we had a $49 million increase in the grand list.
We did have a $49 million increase in the grand list.
Okay.
So we've had business expansion. So we've had some expansions that have occurred that are now fully on the grand list. We've had a valuation increase with regards to motor vehicles, and we've had some housing, new houses that have been built over the course of the year that have come to full development. So we've had a fair amount of activity. A large portion of that is in our, we have a lot in our industrial, and then clearly motor vehicles. That's a nationwide phenomenon. We had it happen last year. It's again happened this year. So yes, there is an increase in grand list.
Thank you.
So this number would be the 0 increase across the board?
This number provides the same mill rate, so a 0 increase to property taxes.
What would the increase in the Board of Education budget be?
So the Board of Education budget, based on what Mr. Anderson gave us, is $1.
Okay, thank you.
49 million.
609,000.
We had about a
Your budget book, it's on A3,
Right.
bottom line.
Yeah, we had about a 3.7% increase in the grand list. We have been doing a lot of ribbon
We
cuttings.
have.
And our businesses have been really expanding, so we've had some great growth in this last year.
And hopefully we can keep it going.
Right, and so everyone's aware that, if, you know, your standard house, if you've, you know, been in your house and your house value hasn't changed, right? We've not revalued anybody or anything like that. That's still all the same. This is in, you know, these are, you know, are people that have done additions to their homes, have built new homes, or businesses that have done substantial expansions, right? That's where that grand list growth comes from. It is not, you know, revaluating everybody's property. So the average homeowner is going to see the same tax bill based on what's being proposed in the resolution.
So, I will entertain a motion to adopt a resolution approving the Town of Killingley operating budget for fiscal year July 1st, 2022 through June 30th, 2023. Be it resolved by the Town Council of the Town of Killingley that in accordance with Section 1005 of the Town Charter, the budget for the Town of Killingley, Connecticut for the fiscal year July 1st, 2022 to June 30th, 2023 in the amount of $19,809,065 allocated to general fund, or excuse me, allocated to general government. Sorry, I was getting ahead of myself, turned sideways before I finished reading. And $49,029,799. Wow, I am reading. All right. So that would be $45,029,799 allocated to education for a total combined budget of $64,838,864 is approved and shall be filed with the town clerk for submission to the annual town meeting for its adoption. Can I get a motion to adopt this?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second it.
Motion has been made by Mr. Catula, seconded by Ms. Wakefield. I will open up for discussion if anyone has questions, comments. Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries unanimously. Next item on the agenda, item 4. I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second it.
Motion has been made by Ms. Wakefield, seconded by Mr. Catula. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? This meeting is adjourned.